Hello Victoria, my name's Jessica Davis and fortunately a terminated paramedic and a terminated nurse just like thousands of other workers in the state. I'd like to introduce a new e-petition to the Parliament of Victoria called Review the Vaccine Mandate Imposed on All Workers. What is an e-petition? An e-petition is an opportunity for citizens to have a voice. It is a call for action. We need the Legislative Council and the decision makers to review the current vaccine mandates, the strict measures that are in place to date, taking into consideration that the state of emergency is declared over. We have high vaccination rates, we have high immunity, and we have healthcare workers that are burning out. So taking into consideration all factors, we need the decision makers to review the current situation. And essentially what we're asking for is for the COVID-19 vaccines and also the flu vaccine directions to cease immediately, and also issue a state directive to all the employers to reinstate the employees that were terminated because of the COVID vaccine mandates. How do we get this done? We need 10,000 signatures for a parliamentary debate. So let's go to www.aw4a.com.au, sign, share across the state, and let's get this job done.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
Our message is very, very simple. We want to educate the kids, not indoctrinate them.
She doesn't want these projects in her backyard, in Warringah. She wants them in yours.
What's wrong with Australia today?
For me, it's leadership. There's just a lack of leadership.
We should be energy independent here in Australia. We've got everything.
And it's good to see the community come out and really engage in this issue of parental rights.
You only have one vote, but it's very powerful.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Tripp, flying solo again here tonight. Thank you for everyone who are watching live on Rumble, Facebook and YouTube. Of course, you can always watch live on those platforms, so please follow us there. If you do want to watch past episodes, the best place to do that is Rumble. Please support Rumble because we don't have any problems with censorship or free speech or anything with Rumble. So head over there and follow us to watch all our previous content. And also let me hear your comments as well. If you're watching live, you can always put the comments in the chat, ask a question, make a statement, let us know your feeling. I do welcome you to do that because it is quite powerful to hear our great audience and what they think. And also the link is already in the chat if you want to call in tonight, maybe have a yarn with me, ask me a question, get something off your chest. There's a lot going on in the world at the moment, a lot of big issues. So if there's anything that you particularly want to talk about, feel free to either comment in the chat or hit that link, that StreamYard link. You can use your phone or your laptop and call in and you can talk to me directly. But if you want to support me and Commanding the Narrative and all the things that we are planning to do, I've been encouraged to launch a website soon. So that's going to be a little bit daunting, and it will take a bit of expense to do so. And that is a hard decision with the cost of living at the moment, especially with interest rates about to go up and inflation, and not to mention just stuff like Strata. Like one day I'm going to do a whole podcast on the Strata industry and how much of a scam Strata is. Like, honestly, they just rip you bare, Strata fees, for all those people that are living in units in Sydney or Melbourne or Newcastle, Brisbane, Perth, wherever you are living in high-rise or low-rise units. You'll know all about Strata. So one day I'm going to tackle that issue because it definitely needs tackling. It's probably one of the biggest scams out there, Strata. But with that said, if you do want to support me in commanding the narrative, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee. I talk about this every single week. Of course, there's no obligation to do so, but if you would like to throw us a few dollars, this is just an outlet for you to be able to do that. So please head to Buy Me a Coffee. You can make a small donation, you can make a large donation, whatever you choose, and it would be much appreciated. And it gives me, I say this every week, it gives me that warm fuzzy feeling inside when I get that email to say that someone has donated. So that is there if you choose. Also, if you want to head to our t-shirt shop and get one of the great Commanding the Narrative or ex-candidate t-shirts, you can head to excandidates.t-shirts.net.au and get one of your own ex-candidates or Commanding the Narrative t-shirts. And also, if you have a design idea, email us info.excandidates@gmail.com and maybe submit through some design ideas that you would like to see on a t-shirt. Let us know. Give us your feedback that way as well. I'll also let you know about the Light newspaper. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this tonight, actually. Now, the Light Australia is looking to expand its distribution, particularly along the East Coast and in Sydney. If you would like to be a distributor, please call the number 0406 861 816. If you don't want to call, text that number. Let them know that you're interested in being a distributor. These Light newspapers are free to the public. But there will be a small cost for you to purchase the papers. I think it's about 15 cents a paper. So it's not all that expensive. But if you're outside Sydney, you can head to thelighaustralia.com. And look, with misinformation laws and disinformation laws looming, they might get to a point where hard copy newspaper style media is the only way to get certain information out. So please support the Light. If you, and I know people really do support the Light newspaper. If you want to head to the Light website or call that number and be a distributor, it would be much appreciated. And I actually want to talk a little bit about the Light tonight. It actually dovetails nicely into something that I want to discuss. And I wrote an article in the Spectator Australia this week that got published there called "More Power to the People." And something happened last night. I was at the Tucker Carlson event in Darling Harbour. I didn't actually go in and watch actually because I had to work last night. But before I went to work, I went down and helped hand out the Light Australia newspaper. We're trying to get it out there to a bigger audience, and the people that were behind the distribution in Sydney asked me to give them a hand, so I was more than happy to do so. We copped a bit of trouble, actually. It wasn't before long that the police were looming around and started to hassle some of the people handing out the Light. And then I was approached by a very nice man. It was actually a gentleman, really. But he was a ranger, supposedly for the place management authority or something or other, something I'd never heard of before. And he said, you can't actually hand out newspapers in Darling Harbour. You need to get approval for that. And I said, well, where do you get that approval from? And I suspected it because I knew from the federal election, I'd actually contacted the council here on the Northern Beaches and asked them if I could hand out flyers at the ferry terminal. And they said, well, you need to get an application, an authority to do that. And you also need to get a waste disposal application for approval. I mean, the craziness, it's just absolute craziness. But I suspected that would be the case in Darling Harbour. But what I didn't suspect was he was telling me that it's all operated by a third party. It's actually a company, not part of the government. The government outsources the control of Darling Harbour to this company. And it was really confusing because he didn't even understand the whole structure of it all. And I was just asking him politely. And as I said, he was a really nice guy, a great guy. Just so I could understand who had the authority to say that you can't hand out newspapers free newspapers. We weren't even asking for money. Free newspapers in Darling Harbour. And while I'm having this conversation with him, trying to work out who does have the authority, and I assume the government has that authority, but how do they implement it? And supposedly it is through the third party company. The police were looming over his shoulder, and they were watching the whole conversation. And even at one point, one of the police officers who looked like she was in charge stepped over and goes, "Is there a problem here?" And I felt completely intimidated by it. To have the police, I'm just having a conversation with this man. By this point, I'd moved all the newspapers over to the side. I didn't even have any in my hand anymore. We were going to pack up and leave. You ask us to leave, no problem. We don't want to cause trouble. We'll move on. But they were treating me like I was some sort of suspect or something like that. I wasn't being aggressive or violent or raising my voice. I mean, we're having a decent conversation, the two of us. What do the police have to do with any of this? And in actual fact, this ranger was telling me you can't, he was giving me the whole list of things you can't do in the Darling Harbour precinct. You can't even film down there. If you want to take a professional camera down there and film an advertisement or something like that, supposedly you can't do that. Why? How much control do these governments want to have over us that we can't go to a public place, hand out newspapers, and we're not asking for money. We're not forcing it into people's hands. If they want to take it, they can. If they don't have to. You can't even go down and film down there. I know buskers even have to get authority to be able to busk. I mean, really? Is that the world we want to live in? Is that the country we want to live in, where a busker can't go down to the local park and play music or sing a song or whatever they want to do to earn a few dollars? Do we really want to restrict that? Like, is there a reason? Tell me. I mean, I'm sure there may be a reason, but please tell me what it is. What is the reason why government feels as though they need to implement a process where you have to apply to be a busker? And this really rocks me to my core, because I felt, firstly, how come a third party company is controlling all of this? How come you have to, if I was to apply to hand out newspapers in Darling Harbour, I would have to go through a non-government company to get that application, according to this ranger? Do we really want to live in a country like that? Is there a reason why it's set up that way? I mean, if there's a perfectly good reason, I would love to hear it, because maybe I would be able to comprehend it better and I wouldn't feel so threatened by that. I felt completely threatened by that. And I walked out of there. I had to walk back to the train station feeling like I was living in another planet. I mean, maybe I'm overreacting by this, but what's the reason? Why can't you hand out newspapers? Is it that big of a threat? What is the reason? Hopefully it's something that I can follow up a little bit more, and maybe contact some people in the New South Wales Parliament and ask them and see if they can find out as to why those sorts of activities are restricted. And secondly, why is a third party company controlling it? Why do you have to go through this company to make an application? I mean, for me, maybe I'm going a little bit too far with this, but the merger of companies and government is fascism, isn't it? Is that how our system is meant to operate? Maybe it's just me, but I don't feel comfortable with that much governmental control over people's freedom. The freedom to go down to the park or go down to an event and hand out newspapers to people, or to sit down and play a guitar and do some busking, or maybe go down and film a little commercial for your business or something like that. I mean, are these activities that ought to be restricted? Is that really the country we want to live in? So I'm still a little bit, I don't even really know how to describe my feelings about this, it was really a wake-up call. If the last 4 years haven't been a wake-up call enough. But I don't think people, I certainly didn't realize that this was the extent of where our state and our country has gotten to. And it is really quite concerning, because these restrictions that they place upon us, these levels of control, are getting way out of hand, completely out of hand. And I'm sure people that are older, that grew up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, are just shaking their heads right now and going, man, the stuff that I used to get away with when I was younger. And everyone I speak to that's older than me, I'm 39, about to turn 40, they all say, and they all tell me how great Australia was, how great this country was, how great Australia was, and how free they felt here, how great the community was. They had so many friends. Everyone knew each other. Everyone trusted each other. There wasn't any crime. There weren't any restrictions. You were free to do what you want. Sometimes you were free to do crazy stuff, like having your kid on the front seat while you're driving a car without a seatbelt. Like, that's probably a bit too crazy. Like, I do think that maybe there should be restrictions for that. But that's the country that this Australia was, and we have moved so far from that. And I would really like to know if people out there are comfortable with these restrictions that are now imposed upon us. You need a license for everything now, it seems. To go fishing, you need a license. Really? Did we vote for that? Did we ever have an election where we were asked whether people should have a license to go fishing? And I'm sure there's a good reason, but let us know. Ask us a question. Let us decide. Let the people make that choice, because that is how our system is meant to operate. Or maybe I've got it completely wrong. Maybe I've completely misunderstood the whole concept of what Australia should be. Got Richard Storch making comments. Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow night, Richard, for our big episode tomorrow night. But Richard first says, what bullshit bug are their permits? Yes, I agree. What bullshit. He also commented, nonsense. It's a public place. They don't have the right. I agree. I completely agree. When did we give the government this much power? I mean, the people are meant to be the government. The people in the parliament are meant to be our representatives. Richard also says, you don't need a permit to panhandle to beg. Well, one day you might. So this leads me to an article that I wrote, and it was published in the Spectator Australia this week. It's called "Power to the People." Now, the idea behind this article was to ask some questions. Now, the questions that I was asking, well, it was really to spark a debate. And now we've seen through COVID, and we've seen all the restrictions and the mandates and all the draconian edicts that came through that period. We saw what can happen when a government gets too tyrannical. And we haven't really had a conversation to say, well, what safeguards should we put in place so that doesn't happen again? And what safeguards should we put in place that protects people's individual sovereignty, and it increases their participation in the decision-making process of our system of government? Should we completely rely on politicians to make all the decisions and take the voters' opinions out of it? And I know I interviewed Dr. Frank Salter recently, and he brought up a quote from Malcolm Fraser's book that Malcolm Fraser was talking about immigration, and he said Australian voters should never be given the option of deciding anything on immigration. I mean, really? I mean, anyway, so to this article, I start off by saying, if you were the Prime Minister for a day, what would you do? what would you do if you were Prime Minister for a day? I go on to say there's one question that makes my skin crawl. Is like fingernails being dragged across a blackboard. Now, I understand the intention, but a Prime Minister acting alone should not have the power to be an all-powerful dictator ruling over us. The question shows a lack of understanding of how our system is meant to operate. So that is how I started the article. Having a prime minister, and I think why I used that question was to, people always ask that question: if you were prime minister for a day, what would you do? And it's the connotation behind it is you could make any decision that you want. You can pass any law that you want. You can impose any edict that you want, and it'll be pushed through that day. And what would happen? Well, in actual fact, in reality, it doesn't work like that. Our system of government does not work like that. The prime minister does not have that ultimate power to act as a dictator. He's part of a government. He's part of an executive. And he's almost like meant to be, as Kevin Lockrey says, the CEO of that executive, that cabinet, the party room, the government. And they're all meant to operate together. And then to pass legislation, he has to go through the lower house, which he should control if he's in government. But then not the upper house, he doesn't necessarily have control over. So he may have to negotiate with other parties, minor parties, independents to get that legislation through. They might implement amendments to get that legislation through. And even if that legislation does go through Parliament, it can then be challenged in the High Court. So you have the three elements of government. You have the legislature, which is the Parliament, the lower house and the upper house. You have the executive, which is the Governor General, the Prime Minister, all the ministers. And that's a big question that we're going to be talking to Kevin Lockrey soon about, the actual separation of the executive and the legislature. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. And then the judiciary, which is the High Court and all the other courts below it, to then rule on whether the government's legislation is constitutional or not. Essentially, is it lawful to be put in place? Now, those three elements should all be separate, so you don't have a dictator who can just click their fingers and decide to do whatever they want. So I wanted to set that premise for this article by saying that we shouldn't have governments that are all powerful and they can just impose their will on the people willy-nilly without any accountability, without taking any issues to the voters and letting them decide upon it. So as I go on, I talk about, as I just talked about, then the Constitution enforces checks and balances, evidently in the form of the separation of powers. Now, I would also add the fourth arm, which should be the media, if only if it operated effectively and objectively. Now, the media essentially should be the fourth arm of government to hold it accountable. If the government steps out of the line, then you should have a good media, objective media, to keep that government in line and keep the politicians in line. And if there's any corruption or if there's any unlawful legislation, then the media should highlight that and not be so partisan and not come out and defend one side no matter the cost. And then I go on to say, despite prevailing arguments to the contrary, I believe that our system of government has operated well. Now, I do believe that. That was up until the recent pandemic, when power-hungry politicians and bureaucrats extended the limits of their authority far beyond what we should have allowed. Instead of learning from bad mistakes, governments, particularly at the federal level, have looked to extend their power and consequently have assaulted our personal freedom in the process. And then I go on to bring up the digital ID legislation and the looming misinformation and disinformation laws. Did the public ask for this stuff? When did we put our hands up and say, hey, Mr. Albanese, we want a digital ID? When did we ask for that? When did we ask for misinformation, disinformation laws? When did we say, oh, there's too much misinformation out there? I, as a sovereign human being, can't make that discernment of what's rubbish information and what's truthful information. When did anyone say that? When did they say, oh, look, I'm too stupid to work out what's true and what's not? Please, government, you take over that role for me. Please. I want you to do it. I want some bureaucrat, some e-safety commissioner to sit there and take that responsibility away from me because I'm too stupid. I can't work. I'm probably too busy. Maybe I've got a family. I've got a job. I can't discern what's true information and what's not true information. When did anyone put their hand up and say, government, please take that responsibility away from me? Yet we have governments, political parties, the Labor Party, they're in government, they're pushing this through. The Liberal Party, they first proposed this. Peter Dutton just came out and supported it. So we have a bipartisan approach. So essentially, there's no recourse to defend ourselves against this bill. It's going to go through. When did we ask for it? When did we get a vote on it? When did we say, hey, we don't agree with this. We don't want this. Tuck this in the bin. We're not interested. We're not interested in any sorts of censorship. Tell me this. Give me an example of when censorship has worked anywhere in the world throughout history. Give me an example, please, in the comments. If anyone has one, let me know. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I ask anyone to do that. So I say, where is the counterbalance? So governments is pushing this stuff upon us. COVID restrictions, all that stuff we saw during COVID, public health orders, now the digital ID, now the misinformation and disinformation legislation, bans on cash, central bank digital currencies, all that stuff is in the pipeline. It's coming towards us. But where's the balance? Where's the safeguards? Where do the people be able to get some powers back? I say government in Australia is not meant to be dictatorial, authoritative, or totalitarian. Government is meant to be representative with a focus on the best interests of everyday people. In essence, it is a master-servant relationship where the people are the masters. Now, I stole that from Kevin Lockray, but it's true. It's powerful. It's a powerful statement. We, the people, are the masters. That's the way our system was set up. That's why we have a constitution, similar to America, similar to other countries in the world. The people are the masters, and the government is representatives of the people. So I say the aftermath of the pandemic should have seen less draconian edicts and more safeguards against unjust government legislation. Yet, for example, a COVID Royal Commission seems more fantasy than inevitability at this point. Good question. Where is the COVID Royal Commission? Albanese supposedly agreed he was going to do it. Where is it? Why is there no accountability from the COVID period? The question is, and this is the whole point of the article, how do we push back the slow march towards totalitarianism? Now, do you feel like there's a slow march towards totalitarianism? Am I going insane? Let me know. Feel free to write in the comments. Maybe I'm going insane. If I am, let me know. But is that how you feel? Do you feel threatened by your government? Do you feel like your government doesn't represent you? Because that's a big deal. That is a massive deal. I felt threatened by my government during the COVID period. My livelihood was taken away from me by government. Do you know how vulnerable that makes you feel? It's terrifying. You have no recourse. When the government says you can't work, what are you meant to do? How are you meant to support your family? Is this the country we want to live in? Why are people so blasé with this stuff? Why do they go, oh, look, it can't happen here. It can't, you're crazy. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's never going to happen. Despite the fact that authoritarian governments have pretty much ruled the earth in most countries around the world throughout most of human history. But it can't happen here. No, of course not. What can we do to firm up our defenses to ensure that our system is operating in the interest of the people and not the political elites? Now, the first thing I talk about is plebiscites for treaties. Now, this is a Kevin Lockray special. International treaties can have a significant impact on the nation. Climate treaties such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement are examples. Now, I don't usually use Wikipedia as a source. I try to keep away from Wikipedia, but in this instance, I've resorted to Wikipedia. Now, this is the list of Australian multilateral treaties from 1856, believe it or not. Now, I'm sure most of these are necessary and quite reasonable and sensible, but look at them all. Look at them all. You can scroll forever. It's like it's longer than credits from a movie. Like, it just keeps going. Like, you would never be able to read all these treaties, and who knows if all of these are still in force or they've finished up. I mean, it only goes to 2017 for some reason. But when did we get a vote on any of these treaties? And a lot of them, look, in fairness, a lot of them are amendments. There's the Convention on Cybercrime, Convention on Cluster Munitions, Universal Postal Union, Southern Indian Ocean Fisheries Agreement, Third Protocol amending the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. Like, most people out there wouldn't even know what this stuff is, and it probably has no impact on us at all. But some of this stuff does have impact on us. The statute of the International Renewable Energy Agency. But when is this ever even talked about? I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff there. But when does this ever come up in our media? When is this ever taken to an election? Do you remember the last time you voted on whether or not we were going to sign an international treaty? So I think it's a very powerful idea that Kevin Lockray has to have plebiscites for international treaties. I guess the biggest problem with that idea is that, because you can see for yourself, there's so many treaties that Australia has signed. Imagine having plebiscites almost every 3 months, signing these damn treaties all the time. But it is important that we have a say. So I go on to say in this article, the Australian government regularly enters into international treaties, often enjoying bipartisan support from Labor and the coalition. This bipartisan support negates any electoral vote or indication of the will of the people. Yet, there are those that argue that certain free trade agreements and collective international treaties, such as with the United Nations, do not represent the interests of the Australian people nor the national interest. So people talk a lot about treaties for free trade agreements that they're not beneficial to our farmers, or people think that they're more advantageous for the countries that we sign. People bring up the Lehman Agreement all the time. Do we ever go to vote on that? We've got another comment here from Mr. Richard Storch. Richard says, Kate, which is his lovely wife, Kate said the people aren't making the connections between the information and their experience. I told that when you are getting kicked up the arse so hard you can't sit down, you make that connection very fast. Richard, why don't you call in, Richard? I'm here by myself, mate. I'd love to hear your voice tonight. I know you normally call me at this time of night anyway, so get on there. And anyone else watching, click that link. I'll put it in the chat again. Click the link. I'm getting fired up about this stuff, but maybe someone calm me down. Or I'll put the link in the Rumble as well. I see people watching us on Rumble, so please, you can use your phone, you can use your laptop. Just click the StreamYard link there, and you should be able to call in and contribute to this conversation that I'm having with myself right now. So anyway, so I've spoken about treaties with the United Nations, and a lot of these treaties are with the United Nations. Looking forward, There is a concern among a section of the community, and I'm sure a lot of that community watches this podcast, that the lingering World Health Organization pandemic treaty will take away Australian sovereignty and individual citizens' bodily autonomy during a pandemic. To defend against this, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Lockray has proposed that any treaty that the Australian government enters into should be approved by the voting majority by way of a plebiscite. While continual plebiscites may aggravate the voting public, the threat of losing a vote may deter governments from negotiating unpopular treaties, especially as treaties can take years to formulate. Now, I'm making the argument, so as we saw with the list of treaties, there's a hell of a lot of treaties that Australians have signed. And yeah, fair enough, a lot of those are amendments to treaties that we've already signed. So I doubt you would have plebiscites on amendments, although sometimes you may have to. What the restriction is, to stop governments from signing so many treaties, you would have a plebiscite in place. And maybe then a government would say, well, look, we know this treaty is going to be unpopular. We're not going to go down that path, because treaties take years to develop between countries, between multinational bodies like the United Nations. I mean, we've seen with the WHO treaty, it's being formulated over years. So if governments know they're going to lose the plebiscite, why would they continue the negotiations, or why would they enter into the negotiations in the first place? So it might be a backstop. Having a plebiscite there, it might be a backstop to say to governments, hey, there's no point negotiating this treaty. There's no point going to this effort, to spending all these years negotiating this treaty if it's not going to be popular, and if it's not going to be beneficial to the people. John Howard used to say this all the time. If the Australian people are given the vote, they generally get it right. We need to give the Australian people the vote to make that decision. We saw it in the referendum on The Voice. They made the right decision. Some people out there are going to completely disagree with that, but they made the right decision. And generally, the voting public make the right decision. So, back to the article. As treaties can change the policy direction of a nation, the importance of the voting public having their say is as equal importance as voting in a general election, in my opinion. Because treaties really can change the direction of your country. We can see that with these climate change treaties, the Paris Accord, the Kyoto Protocol, blah, blah, blah. Plebiscites could also question whether Australia should continue its membership to international bodies, such as the United Nations or World Health Organization. When have we ever been asked that question? When have we ever been asked whether Australia should be part of the United Nations? Now, you might agree. You might think that overall, Australia should be part of the United Nations. But have we ever been asked? Have we ever been asked whether we want to be part of the World Health Organization? Did that ever go to a vote? I think it should. I think it should go to a vote. Any global, international, multi-international group that Australia is part of, AUKUS, for example, should AUKUS go to a vote? I think it should. I think any group that Australia is part of and that can have influence over Australia and can have influence over policy, I think a plebiscite is reasonable and necessary. And if we're having to do plebiscites all the time, then that might be the consequence of living in this country. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with me. I want to hear from you. The voting, and I finish up on plebiscites by saying the voting public has not had a say on these memberships. It would be interesting to see whether there would be public support to stay part of any of these global bodies. Now, I'm sure most people would probably say, yes, we probably should be in the United Nations. But do we have to be in the World Health Organization? Has the World Health Organization ever done anything good for Australia? Is there any benefit of being part of the World Health Organization? Shouldn't our health system here in Australia be adequate? It should be probably the best health system in the world. So why then do we need the World Health Organization? I'm sure there's good things that the World Health Organization do, but do we need to be part of that group? Maybe the answer is yes, but I think people should have a say on that. So that's the first idea I want to propose. At least have a debate about it. If we don't agree to it, we don't agree with it, but let's at least have the debate. Let's start the discussion, because we're not having the discussion at the moment. The next thing I bring up is citizen-initiated referenda. Now, this is a policy. A lot of the minor parties have this policy. It is used in some other countries, but I think it's incredibly important, especially with the digital ID and misinformation, disinformation legislation, public health orders, legislation and policies that government push through that are incredibly unpopular. Citizen-initiated referendum might be a solution to combat that unpopular legislation. So I start off by saying it has been argued that the act of voting on big issues at an election every 3 or 4 years is not enough. Now, some people say it's probably too much, but some people say it's not enough. Governments can introduce legislation that they failed to mention during the preceding election campaign. Either that, or governments break their election promises and proceed with legislation despite assurances to the contrary. We all remember there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead. Now, that's famous. We all know Julia Gillard said that. The recent digital ID bill is an example of legislation that appears to be increasingly unpopular with everyday voters, but it enjoyed a clear path through Parliament. In state parliaments, bans on conversion therapy have passed, despite no clear public appetite. Citizen-initiated referenda could be the means of addressing all the above. The aim being to diffuse political power and improve voter representation. So what is citizen-initiated referenda? Essentially, let's take, for example, public health orders, and let's say they're incredibly unpopular during a pandemic. And we say, hang on, where did these come from? Public health orders. When did we ever vote on those? When did we say that it was okay for governments to bring in these emergency powers during pandemics? Do we agree with that? And maybe the vast majority of people say, no, we don't agree with that. Then they would have to make a submission to government similar to a petition, where I suppose you would have to gather a certain quota of signatures. And once that quota is achieved, then then that legislation could be repealed. Once a certain level of the voting public say we don't want this legislation, then that specific legislation could be repealed by the voting public, and to say to government, up yours, we don't want this rubbish. Yes, we voted you in to be the government, and you can continue to be the government, but don't think you're going to enforce this garbage legislation upon us. So then I go on to say, provided that the referenda could attract enough public support, citizen-initiated referenda could trigger the repeal of unpopular legislation. And that's when I bring up the state public health orders. Now, it could also introduce legislation that is popular with the public, but delayed by unwilling parties. Now, I bring up some examples. For example, the abolition of payroll tax, stamp duty, the construction of new dams. If, say, for example, the voting public agrees that it wants to abolish stamp duty, then citizen-initiated referenda could be the mechanism for that to happen. So the voting public could implement its legislation and force the government into doing certain things. Why do we need to wait until an election at the earliest to initiate popular legislation or remove unpopular or concerning legislation? Why do we have to wait for an election? Why? If there's something that can generate enough public support, then isn't that what government should be? If the voting public is calling to either introduce legislation or repeal legislation, then that's the will of the people. And I think that is a completely reasonable way that the government should operate. Now, people may be able to push back against that and say that's not the best way to go. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear from it. I also want to hear from your callers. We've got one waiting. Give us a wave if you're ready. Ready to go? All right, let's bring him on. Richard Storch, you'll have to unmute yourself, mate.
Done.
How you going?
I think there's a great danger with citizens-initiated referendum, and it's the same issue as with the same-sex marriage issue, which the politicians kept on playing around with, and in the end they just threw up their hands and said, "Oh, we'll put it back to the people." Well, their whole job is to represent us. It's not to get a free pass when things get a bit difficult and say, "Oh, well, if you don't like the legislation, just have a citizens-initiated referendum and we'll change it for you." Their job is to get it right in the first place, and nothing should absolve them from that responsibility.
But you know the caliber of the politicians we're dealing with at the moment.
That is a structural problem.
But how do you address that? How do you ensure that there's a better representation? How do you ensure that there's a better quality of politicians within the system?
Educate voters. There's a great need for education of voters.
Do you think that's going to solve the issue, though? I mean, I think there's talent within the major parties. There's certainly talent within them, but they seem to get cut off at the knees. I mean, there comes a point that I feel that maybe political parties get too big. I think the Labor Party is completely controlled by factions and unions, to the point where I can only imagine the great talent that has gone through that party and just been chewed up and spat out and never been in a position to be elected.
There isn't that much talent around in the Labor Party, I don't think.
Well, maybe you never see it.
There's a monoculture of trade union officials and lawyers. So I don't think there's that deeper talent pool. And they've made it shallower with Emily's list as well.
Don't you think leaving more decisions up to the voting public is more favorable than leaving it up to politicians?
I think we've got to be very careful about abrogating their responsibility. They are responsible to represent us. That's what their job is.
Yeah, I agree. But what safeguards can you then put in place? What safeguards can you then put in place to ensure that they're doing that?
Well, I'd have to say that you can't ever probably have enough safeguards, and probably the ones you put in won't work all that well. It's a flawed system.
Oh, God, here we go. We're about to hear the libertarians' view of the optimum system, which is just anarchy and doing whatever you want.
Not from me. No, you're not going to get that from me. No way. I mean, they don't. Some of their ideas are probably worse than anyone else's, I think.
You're a great advocate for your own party, Richard.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, on Wednesday, I got congratulated for being the only person in the room to dissent from a party motion. And they're so happy with themselves and congratulating each other because they embrace dissent. So it's not like other parties.
Wow, yeah, that's for sure. I want to bring up, while I've got you here, the next part of my article, which was recall elections. Now, this is something that I've brought up as to I mean, and the whole purpose of this article was to spark debate with people. And not all these ideas are perfect. I really do like the plebiscites for treaties, but that might be problematic as well. None of these ideas are perfect. I think the recall election idea that I talk about next is probably the least perfect of them all, mainly because it is implemented in California, and I think they have one every. Actually, I say it here in the article. Since 1913, California has seen 180 recall attempts of state elected officials. Now, however, there have only been 6 successful recall attempts, but I can see that activists would really take this and try and manipulate our system by trying to have as many recall elections as possible. What's your thoughts on recall elections?
I think if we had recall elections, they'd want longer terms, like 4 to 6 years, and that's something I'm really against. I don't really trust enough governments of any condition, of any stripe, enough to give them more than 3 years. I want to be able to throw them out after 3 years, but recall elections strike me as being more of an excuse to do other things, like have longer terms, and that's what concerns me.
Well, I know if we were to try and implement any of these things, governments would want their own bite of the cherry, but we just say no. I mean, at the end of the day, the voting public gets the ultimate decision. Just say no.
Do they make the right one? Do they actually know what they're deciding?
Well, I guess the objective of my article is to start that educational process, start that thought process, start the discussion and the conversation of whether some of these ideas are good or not. And maybe there's other ideas out there that are far better. Well, let's hear them. Let's talk about them. Let's debate them.
Fair enough. But I mean, there's only so much seed you can throw on barren ground.
Well,
not wishing to burst your balloon or anything.
No, hang on. No, I don't agree. I mean, I think people need to be way more active and involved in the political process. And there's no one out there talking about this stuff apart from Kevin Lockray, which I think he's fantastic. And I can't wait to have him back on to talk about this stuff and hear his views. Because, I mean, there's so many politicians out there and people and commentators and all this sort of stuff that are so good at identifying the problems. But how many of them have solutions? I'm at the point where I'm really only interested in the solutions. I know what's going on. We've done podcasts for 2 years. We've talked to almost everyone. We know what's going wrong. We know what the problems are. I'm sick of hearing about it. Let's start fixing it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the country's quite where you are yet. It's getting there.
Hey, your mate John Ruddick has a fantastic quote. He says, "Leaders don't follow the polls, they change them."
It's a good saying. It still takes time, and
of course. I mean, yeah, as I said, I mean, as I said, I mean, this is the beginning. This is the initial phase. Let's start having solutions-based conversations about this stuff. And look, if it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. But we've got to start somewhere. I mean, I write. Okay, here's an example in the article. Would the constituents of New England and Lyon have enjoyed the opportunity to hold recall elections following the 2010 hung parliament?
Sure. They were pretty mad. At least the ones in New England were.
Hey, mate, like Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott, they would have been recalled straight away. I mean, fancy voting for a Conservative, supposedly independent, and then they're going back Labor. Back them into government.
Well, there was a lot of transactions happening. Yeah, they basically took 20 pieces of silver to do that deal, and Gillard was happy to give it to them because it wasn't her money. So it was a bit of the old story.
Yeah, well, this is the problem, mate. How do you feel about Bill of Rights?
Well, as a parent of a disabled child, I look at the difference between what happens in America and what happens here, and I can see the value of a Bill of Rights.
Can you expand? What do you mean by that?
Oh, in America, you know, they have all sorts of rights to look after the disabled. So they do it better than we do, even with the NDIS, you know, and all the money that's being spent. So I don't know the ins and outs of it, but there's a vast difference.
With the introduction of the NDIS, have you seen any benefit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my daughter's been very well served.
Okay, so you think that was good policy? That was Julia Gillard, right?
I think it was a great idea. I think the policy had lots of merit, but the implementation's been appalling because there's obviously all kinds of rorting going on, and fundamentally the program was meant to support profoundly disabled people, and it's obviously, you know, being distributed to a vast array of other people. It's not confined at all, and it's pretty much out of control.
So, out of the discussion that I had tonight, and the ideas that which ones stand out for you? Are there any that you support or think that have some sort of value, or do you think they're too hard to implement?
I'm attracted to the recall elections. I'm attracted to all of them, but I just have a lot of apprehension about how much politicians can pervert them. That's my fear, and they are bad. They have done a lot of perversion.
Yeah, of course. Oh, I mean, that's
for a sec.
Yeah, yep, no worries. Oh, give us a wave when you're ready to come back on, Richard. But look, I'm not saying that any of these ideas are going to be perfect, and they probably do need a little bit of molding and manipulation and discussion, debate. But we need to have that. We need to spark thoughts in people's minds. Like, if you're listening, have you ever considered voting in a plebiscite on whether Australia should be part of the United Nations or the World Health Organization, or whether we should sign a specific free trade agreement with, say, China or Japan or India or even the UK? You know, maybe the whole purpose of this article that I wrote was to spark those thoughts in your mind. We have Richard back now. You'll have to unmute yourself again. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Too much smoking, mate.
No, it's a lurgy. I've been fighting it all week. So yeah, I think all of your attitude, all of your ideas are good ideas, but they haven't been debated sufficiently, most of them.
But that's the idea, Richard. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? You can't just come out with a complete comprehensive plans. In a way, I'm almost saying, look, I'm not the brightest spark in the room. I might not have all the answers. Here's a canvas, right? Now all the bright minds and the bright smart sparks out there. Now you take this idea and develop it and grow it and see what you can come up with.
Yeah, I'd be looking more to have safeguards against politicians. It's like I'd be wanting to find out what they were intending to do to get around things and change things.
Well, here's another idea. If I was ever elected, I would like to, and I probably have to spend a bit of time in there to see if this was appropriate or not. But I would like to set up a little webcam in my office, and if any politician wants to come in and discuss something or negotiate on policy or something like that, I would live stream it to the public, because the public should be able to get access to these conversations that are happening. because essentially politicians are just representatives of the people. You're meant to be representing the people. So why does there have to be things concealed from the public?
Well, politicians don't want any scrutiny, and this government's been particularly obsessive about that. I mean, everything's got a commercial in confidence clause on it. We don't know what they're doing, what the contracts are, what they're spending, what it'll cost, what the ongoing costs will be.
Where's the contract for the COVID jabs? How much money did they spend on that? What did they sign up to? What did they agree to? How come we're not seeing that? It's not, I can understand why certain things like national defense are top secret. Maybe treaties or agreements that we have with allies, or things that we look to purchase, or strategies that we have. I can understand why that would be hidden from the public. But when it comes to the contracts that the government signed with Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca or the Novavax or whatever it might be, how come we can't see that? How come that's hidden? Why? What
about the contracts to the renewable energy zones?
Sure.
And all the subsidies and all that stuff. I mean,
I agree.
If government's handing over money, there should be absolute transparency.
I agree. Completely, I agree.
If we do that, then we're about halfway to where we want to get to, I think. But at the moment, the public is spectacularly incurious about what the government does with our money, how it gets it, and where it goes. It's incredibly incurious. But I think it'll change very fast, very soon. I think we're just heading into a very uncomfortable time.
Well, I think that's even more reason why we should be having these discussions and these debates to safeguard against having to go into an uncomfortable time. I mean, I feel like there's some dangers on the horizons, and if the public don't get their act together and start getting more active and involved and start putting pressure on politicians, then we're almost asking for them to just do what they want to us.
Well, we are. They are. And they will. So.
Now, Richard, tomorrow night we've got a huge podcast coming up. We were meant to just be interviewing Warren Pickering, but now it's somehow grown into this almost big event. You'll be involved. Millie Fontana will be involved, and we're going to be discussing the presidential debate and Tucker Carlson giving it to the media. Maybe a little bit of Julian Assange. Is any of that sparks your interest? Is there anything that you're looking forward to?
No.
You just said that to spite me. I know what you're like.
Well, I only care about one thing with American politics. It's like, how good a friend is the American president going to be to my country, our country?
Well, they're always going to be good friends. I mean, they got military bases on our soil.
Obama was a lousy friend. He told us we were important and that we hit above our weight, and he told the same thing to everybody. He was completely insincere. He was a dreadful president as far as Australia was concerned. George W. Bush, on the other hand, was the greatest American president of all time, as far as Australia is concerned. He might have been horrible to Americans, but
we probably won't talk about this tomorrow night, so it's probably a good idea to talk about this now. Tucker Carlson said in his speech at the height that Australia shouldn't assume that America is going to be there for our defense, and that America is going to be there to defend us. And that's an American saying that.
I disagree. He doesn't understand.
Robert Nalbandian says, "G'day, Robert. Thank you for watching, mate. There's a link in the chat there. Click it, and we want to hear from you. Come and say hello. We're about to probably jump off in 5 minutes, but quickly click that link. Use your phone, use your laptop. I want to say g'day to my good mate Robert Nalbandian, the former UAP candidate for North Sydney, which is now abolished. So I'll be interested to see what Big Rob has to say about that. But
yeah,
do you think America would jump to our defense?
I think America had an awakening during the Second Iraq War, where they suddenly discovered that not everyone loved them, and that they only had two friends, us and the Poms. And the Poms basically because the Poms don't have any friends either. So, so they suddenly realized that they've only got two true friends in the whole world. And there's just no way an American leader could fail to do whatever he could to support Australia.
But Richard, you study history. Australia used to think that the British would be there to save us. And because we were part of the Commonwealth and the British really only had the Commonwealth, that the British would be there to defend Singapore and push back against any threats from the north. Well, what happened?
What happened was the British did not have any resources to send to us.
So why do you assume that the Americans are going to have resources to protect us?
The Americans are in a very different situation, and they're not fighting a war against anyone.
Not yet.
So it's a very different situation. And the other thing was that the British also were unprepared and had very poor response to the Japanese. And I think also the Australian military was not invested in and prepared before the war anyway, and we were never in any danger of being invaded by the Japanese. They simply didn't have the capability. So there's a lot of hysteria about how we were abandoned by the British. We really weren't in any great danger in the first place.
But that's not the opinion of the Australian people, because there were plans to draw a line through the Northern Territory and Queensland right across the country, and they would pull back and defend that line.
I used to torment all my Queensland customers with the Brisbane line. It still inflamed them. So, look, it's the Japanese had no capability to invade Australia. They just didn't have it.
Well, look, I don't think any country has, because we're such a vast continent, and it would be hard with just supply lines alone to invade. But
there's a lot of propaganda about this, because there was always a strong element of anti-British sort of sentiment from the Irish, and it just got inflamed. And then you had lefty historians like Manning Clark saying, we were close to being invaded and Britain abandoned us and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, Richard, we've got another caller calling in, Mr. Robert Nalbandian, Mr. North Sydney. How you going, mate?
Good morning. Hey, guys. It is morning, right?
Wow. I mean, I do these things late. I'm on night shift mode.
Whenever you can.
That's right. How you going, big fella?
Man, I'm doing good. I was this week's been pretty extraordinary. I was overhearing you when you said join, and then I was listening in. So I'm on my phone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I was at Tucker, and I was there in the audience when he said that he was pretty much saying don't rely on, this is how I would interpret it. I would say he was saying don't rely on an American government that is trying to destroy America, to save us as Aussies, even though every American government kind of says, hey, Australia, you need to do this and that because you're our friend, right? And we're like, sure. And I think a lot of our international policies are driven by America, whether we like it or not. Like, I don't think Australia has really had much of its own. We've never really stood on our own 2 feet regarding, international policy. It's always been shaped, I think, either from the British or America. So, and they are our allies. So, but I was there when he made that, and I was there last night at the show. So, yeah.
See, if I was defense minister, I would be going to the defense department and the generals and everyone and saying, what do we need to do to be able to defeat China? As preposterous as that might be, what do we need to do? Is there an avenue for us to be able to do that? And you talk to people like Lieutenant Colonel Alastair Pope, and he'll say, build a shitload of drones and and buy a shit ton of long range missiles, and you might have a chance. Why are we not having those discussions? Why are we just going out there and buying nuclear subs?
Well, I think I would say I think there's more important things like vaping bans and the voice to parliament. This is where our government's focus is. Sorry, Richard, I didn't mean to cut you off. I had the chance to be in the Senate on Tuesday night with Andrew Robertson, the ex-Warringah candidate for UAP, which is our good friend.
Yep.
And I actually got the chance to speak to some of the other senators who were not in the UAP, and I don't want to name them just in case it affects them or whatever. But, we were there watching some of them, and this is what they're debating at like 8:30, 9 o'clock. Oh, we need a vaping ban, and this is really important to ban vapes. It's like, really, guys? Like, why don't you just make it illegal till 18 like everything else? Oh, no. We need to make sure. It's like, well, that's where our focus is on. Well, the government's focus anyway. So, and this is what, if you're saying this general said buy long range missiles, buy drones. Well, how much are they going to spend on that, and are they going to do it? And on top of that, I think
well, look
our
how much
government
they're spending on nuclear subs, mate. We're not going to get them till God knows when.
Well, no, and if we had industry, if we had the nuclear power, if we had if we had the infrastructure to do it ourselves, which we could. Tucker Carlson made some interesting observations, and he said that we have enough natural resources in our own country to be like so self-sufficient and be able to protect ourselves and wealthy, and you name it. And I thought, yep, that's right, but we don't do it because the powers to be in charge, they either incompetent or idiotic or evil, one of the two or three, I should say.
What was your overall opinion of the Tucker Carlson event?
Have you guys watched the Tuesday smashing of the ABC, the AAP, and that's gone viral. I don't know if anyone's listening now, go do yourself a favor, watch other American commentators comment on it. They're like, I can't believe people in Australia like this. They're Tucker made a comment. He goes, you guys are what did he say? He said, you're basically reading the boss's list and you're castrated little robots repeating orders, commenting your boss.
I think I might have that clip. Let's see if we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tucker, thank you for taking those questions. I'm sure you enjoyed.
Actually, I loved it. I just feel sorry. I mean, because I got here and the country's so unbelievably beautiful and the people are so cheerful and funny and cool and smart. I'm like, your media's got to be better than ours. It can't just be a bunch of castrated robots reading questions from the boss. And then it turns out it's exactly the same, maybe even a tiny bit dumber.
So yeah, that was Tucker in full flight. I mean, that was probably that was a complete masterclass of how to deal with left-leaning media, and I wish every right-leaning politician here in Australia watched that and then tried to emulate it in some possible way.
Well, I mean, when I was sitting there, we're sitting there and we're listening to these questions. On the effectiveness on because the one reporter talked about the effectiveness of vaccines, the others called him
he was calling for he was saying that there's a white replacement theory.
Not just that, but then if you listen to it, like she just jumps from like, oh, so you support the gun violence and things like, how are you making these logical jumps in your mind to go from, it's like if I said, oh, Stephen, you're wearing a white shirt. Oh, so you hate, I don't know, dogs. And it's like, what? There was
not only that, she was saying that he said on his show 4,000 times that there was a white replacement theory. She didn't have a timestamp, a date, an episode where he actually said that as an example. I've tried to find a rebuttal from her. You would think there'd be something floating around on the internet now where he was saying that on his show 4,000 times. there's nothing that I've found. Maybe I'm missing it, but I mean, to think that she goes in there and just says, "Oh, you've said it 4,000 times on your show," and he goes, "No," he says, "Hey, I'm standing here right now telling you face to face that I don't believe in that, and you're telling me that I'm wrong." He said, "How can that possibly be the case?"
That's how they are. Big assumptions. You must be a racist because you're on the right of politics. It's like that's their underlying assumption. I mean, you remember when we were doing the no campaign and we got accused of being racist, and it's like,
I was saying, no, the yes side of the racists.
Of course they are. You know, they're the ones who want to split things up by actual race. We want to keep a united, multicultural, Australia. So, yeah, look, it was good, and last night was really good. Dinesh, what's his name, D'Souza. I've heard him before on YouTube. He's pretty savage sometimes. And then we had another doctor from Queensland, but overall it's good. And I think actually Clive Palmer was there. And he pretty much, and this is not, I'm not quoting exactly, I can't remember what he said, but he pretty much said that the money he spent for the election campaign was like one of the best things to bring people together. And I've always said that as an observation. It was one of the best things. Like you and me, and even I've met you, Richard, before. I've met so many people, and they've met so many others. And like it's not like a single voice in the wild or the wilderness. There's actually quite a number of us. And as we've come together, I mean, last night people were mocking, going, "Oh, as if it's going to get filled." Man, it was packed. It was literally packed. The lines, I think, Chris Coveries, he was covering the doorway. Mate, it was. I was there with the lines. I mean, I didn't have to wait in line. I was fortunate to be able to go through. But it was really, really busy. And so all these people are coming together. And I think it's almost inevitable that we form something, like a force to go back into government, politics. Yeah. It was huge, massive.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've seen the images of inside now. I know I did speak to some people in the line that were telling me that they got their tickets for free. So
yeah, that's right. Some people did. I didn't have to, because I'm UAP, baby.
Now, maybe let's touch on that. You spoke of Clive, and you said that you're down in the Senate this week, and I'm sure that's got something UAP related. I mean, a lot of us are under the impression that the UAP is done and dusted and finished. And I think you hit the nail on the head by Clive running and having the UAP. It gave people like yourself, people like Andrew Robertson, Natalie Duma, Tony Nikolic, some great people, the opportunity to represent their community, stand up for their families, stand up for themselves, stand up for their country. Gave them that opportunity to do that. People say that, the UAP is a failure and Clive spent $90 million and only got one senator. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. And as you said, it's built communities, it's built friendships, it's built networks. But where is it currently? There's a lot of people that are UAP supporters or were UAP supporters that have drifted to other parties because they feel like there's nothing going to happen.
Sure. Look, I'm obviously not a spokesperson for the UAP. So I don't want anyone taking these words as UAP official. It happens. Just again, as my personal observation, even though, and it's funny because it came up on Tuesday as well. Whilst the party's deregistered as I think it's deregistered to run, but the party organisation still exists. Like I still get emails from UnitedAustraliaParty.org. So that means the organisation's still there. It's just not registered federally. Now, I'm not privy to all these things, what's going to happen in the future. And because people will ask me, and I'm sure you get it too, Steve, that, hey, are you running again? What's happening? What are you doing? People want to know. And they have genuine concerns because I think they're all looking again for good caliber candidates. People like yourself, like even, there was one other thing before I forget. Pauline Hanson was like, even as amongst the senators who were doing the good work, she was one of them Clive mentioned and gave thanks to like Malcolm Roberts, Pauline Hanson, Ralph Babbitt, was Antic, Alex Antic, Matt Canavan, and Gerard Rennick, right? Now, what I've come to the conclusion is that we're all kind of, how do I say this? Like, in the most basic way where, there's orange, there's blue, there's yellow, but really ideologically, we're kind of very similar. Like, we're all similar. Like, I got to spend time with some Liberal senators. They're not that different to us. They think on very similar terms. I suspect they have some party constraints when it comes to what they can and can't do. And that's understandable, but I'd be happy with them, if there was more of them in the Senate. So, look, I don't know exactly the future. I mean, we can speculate till the cows come home. I will say, personally, for me, I'm still going to be around. I'm still interested in running. People asked me last night and Tuesday, and they constantly, whenever they run into me in the local shops, I'm not giving up. Whether I run or I support someone of good caliber, good candidate, good character, this is what's missing. So I'll just say, I just feel like to say, I know it's a shame North Sydney being a federation seat is essentially the one earmarked to go, but that kind of means we're down one teal. So, what do you guys think?
Well, we know Richard hates the teals. Do you have any comments, Richard? You're on mute. You're on mute, Richard.
Okay, there we go. I've got plenty of comments to make. I won't miss Kylea, the idiot.
Kylie.
Hey, if you're going to spell it Kylea, we're gonna call you Kylea.
Look,
Kylea. She's got an identity as the most incompetent politician of our times, I reckon.
Look, I agree. Yep.
So, I think Warringah going into North Sydney is great. Which seat are you going to be in? Are you going to be in Bradfield, McKellar, or Warringah?
Again, this is, I don't know. The AEC has not even confirmed 100%. I know it's pretty much earmarked North Sydney's going, but how it's being broken up?
They're not going to change it. They won't be changing any of that. Yeah. They'll have their hands full elsewhere.
That's right. So
they've made a few messes.
I would probably end up in Bennelong or maybe Bradfield.
Okay.
Yeah, look, it comes back for me. I suppose during the 2022 election, I think a lot of us would. I don't want to say necessarily we think the Teals are great, but the strategy they employed, in my opinion, could be replicated on our side. A bunch of either, individualistic types of people who are not necessarily part of a party, but of the same, they're called the Teals for a reason. But that strategy could be employed.
Let me respond to that. I think that what they did very strongly was they formed a community and then it became a cult. So we can do the community without the cult if we work at it. We will never have the money that they had. They had a budget that politicians can only dream about.
Not unless you got Clive behind you.
Or another billionaire.
That's if Clive's interested, but I wouldn't take. You can't count on that. But Simon Holmescourt wanted revenge, so he got it. He desperately wanted revenge on the Liberal Party for not seeing what a genius and wonderful person he is. Exactly like Kevin Rudd wanted revenge and Malcolm Turnbull wanted revenge. They're all the same. It's like because people don't worship them. It's like they've got to spend the rest of their life trying to exact revenge. But
Robert, you brought up the Liberal senators and you said there's some good ones there.
Yes.
Is there any chance of you joining the Liberal Party?
Look. I would say this. I think, and this is what I told them, because look, I want to just be straightforward with them. They both, like, Matt Canavan and Alex Antic, I got to speak to them on the day. They jokingly said, "Oh, why don't you join the Liberal Party?" And I said, "Look, my understanding is there's too much corruption now in the Liberal Party. It's not even a matter of whether they have good principles or not. I agree in the fundamentals of small government and freedom and liberty, all the things that made us essentially Liberal voters once. But are they going to be able to replace the sort of the woke and left-leaning elements in there? Because it seems like,
well, you can't replace it if people are leaving the Liberal Party and going to minor parties, and you've got all these minor parties popping up everywhere. UAP, One Nation, Libertarian, IMOB, Party, Family First. There's a list of, as long as your arm, of all these different parties with fantastic candidates, volunteers, good people in there, wasting their time, often just to fuel the head honcho and their aspirations of either staying in Parliament or getting into Parliament, and they're just being chewed up and spat out. Where instead of fighting that battle, and often you don't have any money, you don't have any resources, you don't have any attention from the media, go into the Liberal Party and fight the battle in the Liberal Party.
No.
Well, it's not as simple as yes or no, because I just think, and this is the example I use. I said, when the foundation is so corrupt, like if there was so much mold and rot in a building foundation, nobody builds on top of that. The foundation is shaky. You literally got to demolish it, clear it out, and rebuild, right? So I kind of, and I could be wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong on this.
The problem with that, Robert, is that the reality is that the only party on the right that has any chance of being elected is the Liberal Party and National Party, the coalition.
Well, they better renegotiate their relationship with all the other minor parties, and then they might have a shot.
Well,
just remember that the Labor government got elected with 32% of the vote.
Yeah, that's right.
36% of the vote and lost 20 seats plus. So that's reality. And that's because of their toxic relationship with minor parties.
And I think possibly that this trend of lower primary votes, I thought it was 31 and 35, but it could be tallied 32 and 36, which means, what's that? That's 68%. So you're telling me there's another 32% primary vote, or I assume there's also votes not counted in that pool, because I know a lot of people they don't vote from the absentee or whatever. So with this large chunk of Australia as primary voters not voting Liberal, not voting Labor, it's going somewhere, and that's what I'm saying. That collective, if we can come together on this part, that would be a formidable part of the government. You might have three major parties in Australia. I think Canada's like that, which I've read a little bit. They have like left and a moderate centre and a right.
My point is, there's not even a discussion about a negotiation or agreement, or even that it's needed. We're not even there yet.
No.
It's like,
well, look, there's too many to negotiate with. I mean, which one would the Liberal Party go to? Like, was it going to have negotiations with each minor party, and then which one does it select the head of the others? And if it says, "Oh, well, we're going to go for the Libertarians this time," well, then One Nation.
There's always a solution. I've offered you one, a joint ticket with an independent campaign.
I think it was Kevin Lockray who had, or maybe it was Alastair Pope. They had a fantastic idea of the minor parties holding pre-selections amongst each other.
Yes. We've talked about that UAP, and I think it was mentioned in One Nation candidates, that we'd have to have, and I think John Ruddick, he might have mentioned this too. So the idea floating around the right of the Liberal Party and the minor parties that, hey, we hold a giant town hall together, right? Let's say we'll use Warringah as a seat. North Sydney's not here anymore. You put the One Nation person, the Liberal person, the UAP person, the family values, whatever they are. You come together with all your volunteers, right? And it might just be a matter of, One Nation, for example, or, Party X, we'll just use X candidates. Party X has, 200 supporters, and the next party had 100, and then 50 and 10. Guys, ditch the bottom three and just decide we're going to put, or sort it out somehow. I don't know, paper, scissors, rock, whatever it is. Figure out a way, and then you'll have all this other support, and go just support that person. Suspend your party rules about maybe not dealing with other parties, because I know, some major parties, you can't go and help another party, you can't be at their event, things like that. So I think that's one good idea, but the problem is that the minor parties, they pride themselves on being different to everybody else. I've listened to libertarian candidates say that, we're not like the other parties, and we're not policy driven, we have an ideology. I'm like, okay, but your ideology produces a policy which is in effect the same as One Nation and UAP. Yeah, but that's because they're policy driven.
Robert,
okay.
They're politicians. They talk about themselves all the time. They're politicians.
And that's, yeah. This is one of the problems.
All politicians spend too much time talking about themselves. It's as simple as that.
So yeah, look, until people come together and work something out, like an agreement or an alliance that's mutually beneficial, I think we're going to be, as you said, we're going to be splitting this. I think it was, well, I forget his first name. You put a T-shirt on your Buomo,
Sam.
Oh, Sam Buno.
Sam. He's big on, you're splitting the vote. You're just splitting the vote. You're not actually doing anything. And to a degree, I understand where he's coming from. So yeah, anyways, look, it's a matter of people coming together. And I thought it would happen from the top down, but I think it should happen from the bottom up. Just people on the ground who just say, listen, we're not going to support any more candidates, and force you guys to talk to one another and come to some agreement. Put your egos to the side, put your emotions to the side. Yes, we've all said things in the past, just forgive and forget and work together, because the nation is suffering. The future of Australia is up in jeopardy.
We can all agree on that.
Sorry?
We can all agree on that.
Yeah. So, that's kind of, I don't know if much has changed in the last sort of 2.5 years since the federal election in terms of minor parties talking to one another. There's also talks of an early election, but I don't think that's true.
I think if interest rates were going to go down, it could have happened, but now they're talking about them going up. So I doubt there's any real possibility for him to go to an early election now.
Yeah.
I was thinking Scott Morrison would do that in 2022. And people are like, every government, well, Clive mentioned this and other people have talked about it, but every government that goes to an early election in Australia, or a split election, because the upper and lower houses don't have the same exact times, they always lose. They never win. So I don't think Albanese government would want that either, because while they do have a majority, I suspect they'll probably win again, but not with the vast numbers they had, and they probably lose some teals, and they're probably going to lose a few little seats. And I hope they lose them to some of these minor parties. Like, I'd love to see whatever it is, a libertarian, couple more One Nation, couple more UAP, whatever it is, get in there. But another thing I've thought about is there is actually a growing Greens movement, and the Greens have they've massively increased in the last 40 years. They've got heaps of senators. Funny enough, we saw the lead Senate candidate of the Greens. He's the leader in the Green Senate, Shoebridge, David Shoebridge, and
my mate.
Yes, yeah. But again, anyway, they've been working hard. So we need to change our strategy. We need to stop thinking, what's that old saying? Insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a new result.
Yeah,
we need to change our strategy. We need to.
Look, I think I would like to see the Liberal Party embrace the minor parties a lot more, because there's a big crossover with a lot of the policy positions, and there are some fantastic people in some of these minor parties, and I would love to see I've used this analogy before. Being in a minor party like One Nation, UAP, Libertarians, Family First is almost like playing reserve grade. And if you're a good reserve grade player, well, what's the next step? You jump up into first grade. Well, first grade, the coalition, Liberal National Party. So the Liberal Party really should be scouting some really good candidates in the minor parties, tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, let's go, come with us, and let's give these Teals and Labor and the bloody Greens a good run for their money. And let's change this country. Let's go back to what this country should be about and implement policies and stand up for yourself. Tucker Carlson showed us the way. That's how you deal with the left. Get into the battle with them, mock them, laugh at them, and treat them like bloody nincompoops, because that's what they are.
Yep.
Yep. That's yes. Yeah, man. I'm telling you, I was there on Tuesday. I've never seen anything like it. And you're right. We need to stand up and stop being afraid to be labelled, whatever words, because the words they've repeated so many times, like that report. She goes, "Oh, you've said it 4,000 times." She's already lost any meaning in her conversation and question, because she's just made up this. But what I mean? Like being called a racist over and over. What does it mean anymore? Like it's lost its power. Like everyone's a racist.
Back in the day, a journalist would say, on your program on such and such date at such and such time, such and such episode, you said, here's the quote, blah, 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 blah. You don't just go, oh, you said it on your show 4,000 times, so it must be true. Give an actual a timestamp of when he actually said it, and then you could say, well, you said it on this date at this time, and you also repeated it on another 4,000 times. But at least give one example that you can prove.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is it. It's a matter of I heard it. It's like when reporters these days, for example, give a news story. It's not even if it's correct. It's I was first. I accused them first. I said it first. Like, have you checked your sources? Have you checked the information? No, nothing. Just
there's all never about any quotes in these articles. It always says an unconfirmed source or an unknown source. I can't remember what the actual term is.
So a dream from the pizza you had last night. Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Well, look, we better finish up, but this is the beauty of doing these podcasts and having it open to people to call in. I wasn't expecting the two of you to call in tonight. I thought I was flying solo, but I think we've had an excellent discussion. It's good to see you again, big man. We're going to have you on Commanding the Narrative again in person.
Oh, okay.
You only live down the road, so next time we're at Richard's house, we can have you over on one of the episodes, because I really enjoyed your contribution tonight, and I can't wait to see you running as a candidate somewhere again, because I know you're going to give them hell, and you're really going to express your views. You're not going to be backing down or being afraid or self-censoring or anything like that.
That's right. And I realize politics is actually if you are truly doing it for the right reasons, it's a selfless job. Like I feel for, the guys in there who are sort of on their own, our senators on their own, Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts. It's selfless, and it's long hours. Like we were there, like watching them debate till 9:30 at night on, like, I don't know why that has to be that late. Like, why do you have to have a debate on a bill till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night? That doesn't make sense. But yeah, well, I'm still in the fight. So still in the fight.
Okay.
Well, Richard, thank you also for joining me tonight. You'll be back tomorrow night on the Ex-Candidates with Warren Mundine, Warren Pickering, Adam Zara, Millie Montana. It'd be great if Warren Mundine did want to come on, but unfortunately we don't have him.
Warren, if you're listening, just call in. Man.
Yeah, just call it. Click that link, that StreamYard link, and you can call in anytime. But thank you everyone else for watching. Just remember, if you do happen to catch us live, you can click that link and join us or join me like Richard and Robert have done tonight. Please share this out tonight. A lot of the stuff that I discussed, plebiscites for treaties, recall elections, citizen initiated referenda. Let's get that conversation started. If you don't like the idea, if you do like the idea, I think they're all incredibly important to have that debate, and we need to get some sort of debate going because politicians are pushing all their crap on us. We need to push something back. So thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.